Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's adult education session. We are so honored to have with us Lieutenant Commander Blake Dremann, who is going to present on the topic Transgender Military Service and Advocacy. He works with an organization called Sparta, and so we are going to learn more about that organization and more about an important topic, especially as we see over these last 4 years continued just terrible policy trying to bar transgender military from serving in our armed forces. And so this is something that is extremely important, and we are so honored to have Lieutenant Commander Dremann with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So let me start out by giving you a little bit of my history here. I'm a United States Navy lieutenant commander. I will put on commander in September. I was selected for promotion this last year, so that's going well, and everything's good there. I've been in the Navy for 15 years. I've done everything from on the sea to under the sea to in Afghanistan to overseas. I've spent the last 5 years on the coast, on the East Coast right now. I was in DC for a while, and now I'm actually in the middle of nowhere near the ocean. In Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, which is where the Navy's Supply Corps headquarters is at, and that's where I'm at right now. Early in my career, when I was in Afghanistan, I was on loan to the Army, but I was chosen to be one of the first women to serve on submarines when we integrated women in 2011. And so here I was, going to be famous for being a woman at the same time that I was starting to realize that I needed to transition to being male. This is 2011. Transgender people were not talked about. We certainly were not talked about in military circles, and we hadn't even, Sparta was nowhere near what it is today. It actually started out as part of Outserve, which led the way on changing the law, repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell in late 2011. But afterwards, we experienced what most people experience when you accomplish a long-time goal is, okay, what do we do now? And there was this sense that we needed to start working on repealing the ban on transgender people, because transgender people were not included in the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so Outserve and their board kind of decided that was not where they wanted to go. They had some other things in mind, and so there was a bit of a split. And Sparta was kind of born out of that split. It was supposed to turn into something much larger than it did. They wanted it to be a larger LGBTQ advocacy, military advocacy organization. But after everyone realized that they were burnt out and tired of doing military advocacy, it turns out all that was left of Sparta was the trans folks. Come about 2015, and we realized that we had an opportunity to be a transgender military specific advocacy organization. It becomes very niche, and so we are not huge, and so that was kind of the beginning of Sparta. But what you'll notice is that Sparta is different in a lot of ways than what you will see in some of your other military advocacy organizations or your LGBT advocacy organizations. And those are one of the biggest things that we are different in is that we are comprised of entirely active duty Guard Reserve service members. We continue to maintain our niche subset, and part of that is so that we are in an organization that can focus on our issues, and they don't get clouded by some of the larger fundraising issues that you would see at larger LGBT organizations. We are an all-volunteer staff. All of our board and volunteers are active duty military personnel. And we have 3 main missions right now, and that is to get our repeal of the ban put into legislation, continue to work within the DoD to better policy for transgender military personnel, and for us to continue our peer support functions that we do with our transgender service members. We're, again, run entirely by volunteers. And so that is what Sparta does. That is the first way that we're different, is we are run entirely by volunteers, and we are tiny but mighty. And the second way that we are different is that because we are active duty service members, we are limited in how we can approach advocating for ourselves. And that is due a lot of ways because we are active duty service members. So things like when the president announced the ban on transgender military in 2016, there are a lot of things that a lot of organizations did, right? They organized the National Center for Transgender Equality and Human Rights campaign to organize protests. They were able to put folks on national television that really were able to be very forceful about their displeasure regarding the ban. If you do a quick Google search for me and how I had to speak on the ban, I had to focus on the other aspects of why that was a bad thing. I couldn't speak ill of the president. I couldn't speak ill of the Secretary of Defense. I had to focus on it from a personal and a transgender military person perspective and speak of it as this was our service and this is what we're doing for the country, rather than why am I so angry? Excuse me. Or why is this a bad thing? And that makes moving policy, a little bit different. So people talk about a lot of times, there are a couple of things that we do that is how do I want to put that? We know how to approach power, and we do it in a way that we focus on the things that we want to change rather than, or we focus on the things that don't need to change rather than the things that need to change. So one of the things that I always speak of is that you are, and the way we approach this is it's never enough to just be right. Does that make sense to everyone? In a power vacuum, especially with the military can pick and choose who they want to be there, right? There is no right to serve in the military. So, and I'll get back to what that means here in a minute, but the reason it's never enough to be right is because, yeah, sure, I can be right, but if I have to know how to get power to shift in order for what's right to actually change. So not only do I have to be right, as in correct in how I approach a problem, for example, transgender people can serve in the military, I have to be able to prove it. So in order to prove it, I had to break some rules in order to show that transgender military folks are already serving and doing some other things. And we kind of had to, not everybody could get away with that, right? I am not ashamed to tell you that I am a white, passing, straight Christian trans man, right? I have lots and lots of privilege. There are a lot of things that people are not going to question when it comes to looking at me versus when it comes to looking at someone else, right? So not only do I have to prove it, I have to prove it to the right people. I have to prove it to the halls of power, which in our case, serendipitously, I was able to be in the Pentagon as we were trying to change this policy in 2015. So I have to prove it to the people in power. Then I have to be able to, then I have to get the people in power to care. Why do I care that transgender people can't serve in the military? Is that really affecting my ability to to go to war? Well, we had to be able to prove that that was the case. These are your folks that are already in the military serving, and they are already doing the job that you want them to do. We need to keep them because it costs 10 times more to replace them. So you have to approach it in a way that gets them to care. So what do they care? Do they care, does it get me better in war? Do they care, is it going to cost me more? Those are the two things that the military cares about. Yeah, all these other organizations, they can care that it's the right thing to do. But when you're in the halls of power, you have to get the halls of power to agree with you. So not only do they have to agree with me, but they have to care. Then once I get them to care, I have to get them to care enough to act, right? Yes, we all know that people care that there are veterans, homeless veterans, right? People know that there are homeless veterans. They care that there are homeless veterans, but do they care enough to do something about it? And so when fighting for whatever cause, and just my cause happened to be transgender people in the military, not only did I have to be able to prove that I was right, not only did I have to prove to the people in power that I was right, then I had to get the people in power to care that this was the right thing to do. Then I had to get people to care enough to act, to change the policy, to make it available for those of us that were able to be able to serve in the military. And then guess what? Then I get to start all over, because whatever they're going to do, they're going to screw it up because they're going to make the minimum amount of movement to get to where they think I want to go, but not necessarily ask me. And then I get to start all over to get them to realize that, hey, yep, that was great, thanks, but we can do it maybe a little bit better in a different way. So those were all things that we had to do in order to get that. One of the big arguments that everyone talks about is that there is not a right to serve in the military. There's not a right to serve in the military. I completely and utterly agree with them. There is not a right to serve in the military. The military has specific things that they do, and not everybody meets the ability to do so. But here's where they're different in the sense that, okay, I totally understand that not everybody has the right to serve in the military, but let's not put up artificial barriers based on your comfort levels that excludes certain people from the military who are perfectly capable of serving in the military and serving their country. Let's not think about, we have definitely moved beyond 1950s logistics. We are not, we can move, people can take their medications into war. This is not an unusual thing. People, this whole idea that people can't deploy on medication is wrong. The whole idea that people don't have privacy or can't have privacy is wrong. We've moved beyond. We are not dealing with open bay showers and open all these, things that people are talking about that make them think of the military out of, Stripes with Bill Murray, right? So the military is not there anymore. We have definitely moved beyond that. And we need to make sure that people are paying attention to that. This is not 1950s. This is not the 1980s. We are definitely well informed enough to be able to use medical practices out of the current century and not 1975. So bringing those folks in and making sure that we are not putting up artificial barriers to people who are perfectly capable is not a, seeking to denigrate the military. So those are kind of the things. In 2016, when the president at the time announced the ban on transgender military, or 2017 when he announced the ban on transgender military, he was able to do that for a couple of reasons. One, obviously you had a bunch of people that didn't want us there. Two, it took so long to change the policy that we didn't have any chance to really implement the policy in the first place, if that makes sense. We had changed the policy in 2016, but it hadn't been in effect long enough to really solidify itself as policy in the military. We had kind of approached it as, well, once we've changed policy, nobody's gonna step back. Nobody's gonna take a step back, right? Because they had never done that before. So we did that. So we had to figure out, okay, well, now I'm back to square one of changing hearts and minds, because now we're dealing with all kinds of confusion and back and forth bad research that the administration put out and things. So you'll see a couple of things that we managed to be able to accomplish there. One, we managed to swing in the first 6 weeks of the ban announced. We put every story we could find into the press. Whether you were talking transgender veterans or transgender military who were currently serving, we swung public opinion from 49% approval rate to over 70% approval rate in a matter of about 6 weeks, from July to the beginning of September. We managed, that also allowed us to finish the funding for the documentary Trans Military, which you can actually see on Amazon Prime. It follows 4 of our transgender service members from about 2014, before we repealed the ban, all the way up to the announcement of the ban in 2017. Across the spectrum, you'll see Captain Jennifer Peace and her family. You'll see Logan Ireland and his wife Layla, who are the power couple of military advocacy and transgender folks. And you'll see Elle Cook, who's also an Army captain. Logan is in the Air Force. And just follow their stories and see the various things. You'll see Layla has now moved on to Minority Veterans of America. And they're doing great things for our minority veterans, and just such a diverse group on their board of trans and cis and all the various colors, indigenous folks, to really get at some of the underserved veteran populations that we see across the military. In 2019, we put four of us in front of Congress. We were the first transgender military folks, active duty, to testify to Congress as junior officers. Oh my goodness. So, you know, you get 4-star generals that testify to Congress, but we decided, oh, let's throw a bunch of junior officers and a couple of junior enlisted in front of Congress and let them testify. Talk about being a little bit stressful. So you can look up on C-SPAN, you can see that that testimony and things. You can some of the history of transgender people in the military. We've actually started an award called the Albert Cashier Award through Sparta that we're giving out to our various top volunteers in each service. Albert Cashier was a Civil War veteran. He actually received a Civil War pension up until the day that he died. He was born Elizabeth something. He was born a female and fought in the Civil War as Albert Cashier and was given full veterans pension until he died in the early 1900s. And then, of course, you all know Christine Jorgensen and things like that. So Sparta is also known for, because we're active duty military and we can't do the push sometimes that we need, we collaborate with other organizations. So I encourage you to look into organizations of Modern Military Association of America. It is the newly combined organization of what used to be OutServe SLDN, Service Member Legal Defense Network, and AMPA, the American Military Partners Association. They combined in 2019 to create a kind of super organization that focused on LGBT military folks and their families. And then there's also American Veterans for Equal Rights out of Texas and New Mexico. They're one of the longest serving organizations that's long focused on military LGBT advocacy and things. So as we move forward, I know I'm running really fast through some of this, so I want to make sure that there's some good time for questions and things like that, because I can definitely go on some tangents on questions. I will post a link. We've got a couple of new initiatives that we've started with Sparta that I want to talk about. We've started a grant program for our active duty service members to cover passport fees. For the policy right now, there are only 3 documents that a service member can use to change their gender marker in the military, and that is a birth certificate, which is not available for them in an updated birth certificate, which is not available in all 50 states. Many of the states don't allow people to change their birth certificates. They can get a court order, which also, again, requires, in many states, requires a confirmation of surgery or of some sort, or they can get a passport, which is usually the easiest, but can be financially inhibitive for some of our junior service members. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to provide that service. So we've started a grant program to do that. And we also have our Just Ships emergency fund to cover things such as getting some of our longtime members either out of a bad situation or covering an electric bill that maybe they couldn't afford because some other thing came up. So Jesse Ships was a longtime member of Sparta and became a veteran and was still working with Sparta, doing all of our IT work. And succumbed to many of the things that our service members experience with discrimination, and add that into transition and being trans and trying to go to school and suffering from PTSD, and succumbed to her demons in 2015 to the great dismay of many of us. So we've named our emergency fund after her. So I know I've gone on about 30 minutes now, so I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions. I'll post the link. You can buy. I wanted to make sure I advertised our shirts, our new shirts, our new logo. So Transgender Military Advocacy Organization and Leadership Has No Gender is our fundraising thing through which We do our passport fee grants, but you can also just donate to the organization, or any of the other organizations that are doing great things. So I wanted to make sure I gave opportunities for questions. Yes, I see Lynn. I know I can't see everybody.
I served in the military for 25 years as a chaplain. I'm wondering what kinds of treatment you received that was not favorable from those in command or from your peers, and how you dealt with that.
So for my personal story, I'm going to go back to that one thing that I said, that I am a white passing trans guy, right? Military loves people that look like men and loves people that look like bald men, like I do. So I have actually experienced no discrimination whatsoever, at least not that I'm aware of. I've promoted twice since I've come out publicly, and I've still have all of the mentors, and I don't believe that I've experienced anything that has hindered my career in any way. Now, that being said, that's me, and that's because I have a lot of privilege and I'm an officer. Many of our folks do not have that kind of experience. Now, during the ban, we were unable to identify anyone that was actually kicked out just for gender dysphoria. But what we've seen is that folks were kicked out under general anxiety disorder, or inability to adapt, or other things that people focused on. I have a Marine who is a male Marine, transitioned to male, has been serving as a man for the last 3 years. But because of the way the Marines do their policy change, his gender marker is not changed yet on his military paperwork. Even though everyone else uses the male pronouns, his officer actually refuses to use male pronouns with him and constantly misgenders him. But because he is in a position of not power and his gender marker has not changed, and the officer believes that he is in the right, he can't do anything about it. So he has to endure that and simply avoids his O3. But as far as my experience is concerned, I've not experienced any ill effects of my transition. And I saw a question in the chat. Does Sparta work with the SHARP, or sexual harassment response and prevention? Seems like trans face similar human rights abuses as women in the military. We have many SHARP advocates who also happen to be transgender folks. And so we have seen the parallels on many of the same things, the intersectionality that comes with being a female in the military. And I spent 10 years of my career as a woman in the military. We are not currently working with SHARP, but we do work with our members on making sure that those resources are available. And we do have folks that are doing education in that regard. One of our members, one of our chapter leaders, our Army chapter leader, is the SHARP leader at Fort Sam Houston in Texas. So she is definitely making sure that transgender perspective is also brought into much of our sexual assault training programs that we know. Modern Military Association of America has been working with SHARP to make sure that we highlight military sexual trauma and sharp things that are associated with LGBT military folks in general, as well as the minority veterans of America, because that intersectionality is also very big.
Yeah, I was active duty Marine back in the 60s, and I saw the misogyny and the sexist culture of the Marines on full display constantly. It was just steeped in that tradition. And I think the conservative military school sources of a lot of the Marine officers played out in pervasive and sad ways. I don't know what it's like today. Maybe you could speak to why you think these misogynistic and discriminatory practices continue to be so pervasive.
That's a really great question. I think that is very. There are a lot of things that are playing into that, and one is where we do a lot of our recruiting. We do a lot of our recruiting in areas that are not necessarily progressive on the rights of women, the rights of LGBT folks, or the rights of people of color. I think you have that is one aspect of it. Two is that the career folks aren't forced to change their perspectives on how they treat someone until they exit the military. So that culture, we have not forced that culture, because so I know that the culture of the military, like I've met so many senior officers in my work with Sparta, that I know that they're cool with it, right? And I know that many, not all, but many of our non-field grade officers who have grown up in the last 25 years are much better about approaching LGBT and people of color and that type of intersectionality there. But the field grade 04 to 06 level of officers across all services is where your issues lie. That because those folks still have all of the command influence that they shouldn't have, right? So, and the military many times promotes to mediocrity. So our general officers are, the cream of the crop, and sometimes our more senior 06s, unless they're on trajectory, that's about a third of your 06s are on trajectory to continue on, and the rest of them are going to stay 06s or 05s, right? And so they have a tendency to be less inclined to be inclusive, less inclined to be open to new experiences. They're expected to maintain they feel they have to maintain that sense of tradition and kind of push back any general officer that feels the need to be progressive. So I think your middle tier leadership is where those attitudes pervade. And since not everyone can continue to monitor what's going on in those areas, those things are allowed to continue. Same with kind of the enlisted ranks. Once you get into the E7, E8s, and E7, E8s, those are the folks that you're going to see the pushback from on whether or not, and it's still really difficult to, for lack of a better word, it's really difficult to fire them once they get to be that rank, right? How do I, because everyone's like, oh, well, what about their families? Because they don't want to get rid of their pensions, right? Even though they're toxic people and they need to go away. And it becomes really difficult to find a way to move that. But that is where, as we continue to, I mean, honestly, one of the only ways that we've been able to get to a point now where racism is while still an issue, is less of an issue than it was 40 years ago in the military. It's really because of, aging folks out of the system. So I think that that's just a great plug, that we need more people in more progressive areas to agree that serving the military is not a bad thing.
Yep. Carol Lee, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I was speaking to my husband, but I did have a question. You said your membership was quite small. So how many members are there in your organization?
Well, according to Facebook, we have just over 1,200. So when you think about in the grand scheme of things of 1.2 million service members across the services, and we have 1,200 service members. Obviously, we've gotten most of the transgender people in the military. There's probably we've got about half of them. The other half probably either don't use social media or don't like the way we do business. They want us to be more aggressive or less aggressive, or they think we're fame seeking or whatever. So they choose to non-affiliate, which is fine. We're going to do what we do, and everyone gets to benefit. So.
Blake, I wonder, some organizations will do educational programs for the higher ups about learning how to overcome racism and learning how to overcome homophobia. Is there any kind of structured educational program that any of the military services are either encouraging or forcing, especially the higher ups, to do?
Wouldn't that be nice? Sparta does. We've been working to try and get some educational materials together. The military did do a training program when we changed the policy in 2016. So just like they continue to do, which is create policy and create training and not include trans people, that's what they did. They created an entire training program that did not include trans people. So the training was very dry and very focused on policy and very made sure everyone was comfortable in the sense that we're not trying to change your beliefs. Again, that is one of our next goals as we move into the future, is to start looking at ways that we can create that training. One of our board members, who will be probably stepping away so he can focus on it a little bit more, is a psychologist with the Veterans Administration. And so he is looking at creating some training, at least at the VA level, that is gender expansive and LGBT friendly, and talking, just how we get our medical folks and our psychologists and mental health professionals to be able to be culturally competent when it comes to the LGBTQ community. So we're working on that. That's definitely one of our bigger goals. Whether or not the military will use it is something entirely different, but we will make it available. Do we have any more questions? I should probably change the view so I can see all of your faces, if there is any faces or hands or anything. Okay.
So, for those of us who are neither transgender nor military, what can we do to support your efforts?
Oh, that was the next question. So we are planning on trying to do a push to add an amendment to the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, for this year to make sure that the repeal of the ban is permanent. So I encourage you, please, to reach out to your House representative and to your senators to make sure that they vote in favor of making sure that amendment goes through, so that we can, because it turns out all of our equal opportunity and things that caused this ban to be able to be put in place, all of those are policies, they're not law. So we want to make sure that all of those equal opportunity policies and the repeal of the trans ban are permanent in law. So please make sure that you reach out into your representative and your senators to make sure that they vote in favor of that. The second thing you can do is if you go onto Sparta's website, which I posted in the chat, that's the donate, but if you go into the main website, there are tons of our Committed to Serve series. There's about 12, I think we're up to 12 now of service members who are telling their stories, and then plus lots of other stories that you can find in there. Share our stories. The best way for people to understand where we're coming from is to share our stories. There is not a single person who serves in the military, or at least a single trans person that serves in the military, that simply joined the military to get free healthcare, right? They all serve for some other reason that has nothing to do with getting free surgeries. I can go get a job at Starbucks easier to get surgery easier than I can to serve in the military, right? So this is not something that people do. They need to see that we're out there, we're doing the job, and that we love our country just as much as they do. So all of those things. And then the last thing is with any of the organizations that whichever one you choose to support, whether it's Sparta or MMAA or AVER or Minority Veterans of America, please make sure you, I encourage you to support all of them other than Sparta, only because we're on all volunteer staff. We don't have any paid staff, so they could probably use it more than we do. So please feel free to donate to any of those organizations, as well as Sparta if you so choose. So all of ours goes into paying for our own Zoom account so we can do things like this, and our grant programs and our emergency fund programs. So they have actually paid staff, so they could probably use it more than we can. Yes, Mel.
Thank you for all this, Blake. Do you know who's offering the appeal to the Authorization Act to repeal the trans ban permanently by law? Do you know either the Senate or the House?
It should come from Spears' office. Representative Jackie Spears. That should be who is leading that. I think she is the one leading the effort this year.
And do you know in the Senate?
Oh, in the Senate, it's probably going to be. No, not off the top of my head. I think it's going to end up. It may be Dremann from Connecticut.
Okay. I do.
Or Gillibrand.
Occasionally. Yeah, Gillibrand would be another choice. I'll be talking to Alex Padilla's staff next week, and I particularly am talking about United Nations funding and human rights and poverty and that kind of stuff worldwide. But this is a piece of that. So thank you. I'll reference that when I talk to his staff.
Thank you very much. I think I've met with his office at one point or another. When I was in DC before the pandemic, we used to do some, Storm the Hill events and things like that. So
Yeah, well, he's so new. He's looking for where the bathroom is because he was appointed to fill Kamala Harris's seat. So, but his staff is now coming into place, and we think we've got enough to work with.
nice, very nice. Oh, I will put my email in the chat for those that want to reach out. Oops, I muted myself. No, I'm good.
You had a question in the chat, Blake.
Oh, yeah. How do we get a hold of me? So I just put my email in the chat. So was there another question? Because I think I answered the Sharp question and the Claremont. How do we get in touch with me? There's my email, blake.preacher@spartapride.org. That's a shout out to my former life as a youth minister back in the day. And if there are no other questions, what do you want to know? I mean, seriously, what do you want to know?
Do you have any comments for the dialogue about sports participation by trans?
Oh yeah. So the science is still forming, right? We're not 100% sure on everything, but we also talk about you have to decide what sports are for. Are sports to develop young folks in the neighborhood of teamwork and belonging and perseverance and things like that? Or are they college programs, right? The NCAA has had a transgender policy since 2011, and there's not been any single event transgender champions yet. The military or the Olympics has done has had a transgender policy since 2004, and there has never been an Olympic champion who is transgender. There have been approximately 2 participants that were transgender they were in the Rio Olympics. They were both in the kayaks events, I believe, and neither of them made the finals. So this whole idea that suddenly transgender people are going to ruin sports when we've had transgender people in sports since at least 2004 without any major issues. And California has a fully open transgender policy, right? Where transgender people there's not a whole lot of regulation or anything like that. You can compete in your identified gender. And California is not experiencing any like flux of women's sports suddenly being ruined by transgender people taking all of the championships. It's not happening. So all this stuff that everyone's talking about, all they'll go back to is the 2 girls in the state of Connecticut and how they won their championship twice in a row as juniors and seniors. I don't know, maybe they put in the work like everybody else, right? It wasn't like, so that's the thing. I see Lynn says, how is the military medical community emotionally treating transgender service members? That is a fun topic. It really depends. I've had really good military medical folks, and I've had really horrible military medical folks. And I've got a lot of medical folks that are scared of me. I typically will tell most of my service members that when it comes to many doctors, the moment you mention the word, especially our primary care providers, the moment you mention the word transgender, their IQ drops 50 points. So, and some of them regain it and some of them don't. It is typically very difficult, and many of our members will change primary care providers several times before they find a good one, who's at least willing to learn and to listen. Because for some reason we still aren't teaching it. But I am in contact with some military medical folks, and we're trying to change that. So, but generally some of the specialized folks are better. Our primary care folks are less than perfect, but we're working to get that improved. And I think that just comes with competency and making sure, and that starts at medical school too, right? So making sure that the medical schools teach LGBT healthcare and competency. Now if I can just make sure that we aren't taking psychologists from conservative organizations that teach that homosexuality and transgender people are mentally ill. So if we can get past that part, then we'll be much better. Well, I don't want to keep you. I think you guys have your service at 11, so or whatever time it is there. I don't know. I'm 3 hours ahead of you.
10.
So
10.
I had to do the math like 3 times before I logged on this morning so that I made sure that I was on the right time.
Thank you, Blake.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions.
Gives me some hope.